observe not only the situation or a security situation or a security environment in Europe, but also my expertise is maritime security. And you may know, you think, why to study maritime security in Prague, the Czech Republic, because Czech Republic is totally landlocked country without sea, right? But now you may know that not only the Czech Republic, but also the other Central and Eastern European countries, such as Poland, Slovakia, Hungary. And have you been there? Yeah, thank you. Some students travel around the Central and Eastern European countries. There now it's a kind of the hotspot, right? Very close to the Ukraine, and certainly the certain impact from Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? So in this sense, I think it's quite good occasion. And thanks to the Professor Sato, today I have the opportunity to explain the security situation around the Central and Eastern European countries. Especially I focus on the Czech Republic, but not only Czech Republic, but also the other Central Eastern European countries or Europe itself. And my expertise, I will told you the maritime security, especially I observed the East China Sea, South China Sea, around Taiwan, and also the comparison of the security situation in Europe and Asia, and possible and seeking the possibility, of the cooperation between Asian countries and European countries to counter, at least to counter the current challenge by the authoritarian regimes such as Russia, China, and North Korea, and sometimes Iran, and also these 4 countries, as they actually try to change the international scene and the international system, right? So in this sense, I think it is a quite good opportunity. そう、すみません。一番最初の列だけ電気消してもらえますか。ごめんなさい。すみません。はい、すみません。ありがとうございます。はい。で、進めて、sorry. Not Japanese, but English, please. Okay. よいしょ。いいですか？はい。はい、OK です。Today's content is the pillar is like this: the introduction of the Europe and introduction of neoclassical geopolitics. And have you heard that word, neoclassical geopolitics? Yeah, later I will explain you. It's a kind of the new approach in the geopolitics. So that's why I think it's quite useful to analyze, or at least think about what is the power, what is the potential of the national, of the state. Okay? And then the Russian invasion of Ukraine, from a geopolitical view, and especially the Central and Eastern European countries' view, and impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and Israel-Hamas conflict, right? And then lessons learned from Russian invasion of Ukraine. Okay. At first, I would like to introduce the Europe and the European regional cooperation, because the European countries and Europe itself is very difficult to grasp with the very, very simple, right? Because there are so many countries. So please. And at least now the NATO has 32 countries, even including United States, Turkey, Canada, right? But mainly the European countries. And then the 27 countries are members of the European Union. And it is 2 pillars of the quite important regional cooperation in Europe, the European Union, and NATO. And here, the most important point is how to decide, right? How to decide the decision-making process and decision-making among the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the European Union. Why? Hi. Here is a member of NATO countries, including the United States, and the United Kingdom now is outside of the European Union, you may know, and then Canada and Turkey. And basically the NATO, among the NATO, the decision-making principle is a so-called consensus base, right? Among 32 countries, but they need to make some consensus through the negotiation, right? So that's why you can imagine how it's difficult to make a rapid decision-making among the European NATO countries. And also, in the European Union, basically, yeah, in the CFSP. And have you heard of this term, the CFSP? No, it is a common foreign and security policy of the European Union. And they need at least a unanimous principle that make conclusion and make agreement among the 27 members, right? So it's so hard, and especially related with Russia and China, and some member had different views and different policies, especially in the case of the China, the Hungary, Greece, and some extent that Slovakia has different views, and so that's why this unanimous principle is a very, very challengeable obstacle to make a more solid and rapid decision making among the European Union. Right? So this NATO and the European Union is a major two regional architecture so for security and for economy and social. And then and EFTA and the OSCE also exist, even including Russia. But actually, this too is a quite important point, important pillars. And always, the European countries or European area is the biggest feature of this region is Henry Kissinger once described, who do I call if I want to call Europe? Because 27 countries or 32 countries. So that's why decision making is quite difficult, and also is quite diversified. So many differences, or even not only the level of the economy, but the direction of the strategy, and also the military capability levels and so on. So it's totally different. So that's why to make the Europe single is quite difficult, and also that quite challengeable point. But now, after the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, it is totally changed. And now they're changing quite rapidly. And here, this image shows you the NATO, the latest NATO member countries are highlighted with blue color, right? And thanks to Putin, finally, Finland and Sweden also participated in NATO, right? So traditionally, Finland and Sweden kept a so-called neutral policy, right, between European powers and Russia. But finally, they decided to participate and expand to the NATO to the more closer the Russian border. And here is the European Union. And European Union also, the Turkey, for example, Turkey request and Ukraine already request and start the official the preparation of the future participation in the European Union. But what about so-called Balkan countries? Balkan countries also request and want to participate in the European Union, and mainly to get the economic assistance from the European Union countries, other countries such as Germany and France. But some countries, and also the totally different views and different opinions among the Balkan countries and the accession of the Turkey. So that's why it is quite difficult. It is a quite big challenge. And also, if Ukraine, the European countries will accept Ukraine first to enter the European Union, what about Turkey? And what about the Balkan countries? So that's why this kind of balance is also quite challengeable. And then quite big differences or diversification of the threat perception is also problematic, because the European countries had a different, basically it's a tendency, but the different threat perception. For example, the Central Eastern European countries or Baltic countries and Scandinavian countries, they primarily fear about the Russian invasion or Russian threat, Russian military capability and their expansionism. But for France and other countries like Portuguese and Spain, their more concern is terrorism, right? The terrorism from African countries or the Middle East. And then, especially the lone wolf type, including the lone wolf type of the terrorism. And here, English, United Kingdom and Norway, and they also worry about the Russian activity, naval activity, and especially sometimes the Russian special ship destroyed, and the sea cable between Kingdom and European countries and so on. And the Mediterranean countries also focus on the more the illegal immigrants from Africa and the Middle East. So that's why basically their concern is sort of different. And it's so hard to make one consensus, right? And I had some lectures at the Charles University in Prague and the Defense University in Brno in Czech Republic. And in the case of the Charles University, there are so many students from within the so-called Erasmus exchange framework. And from students from Portuguese or Spain sometimes describe the current Russian invasion of Ukraine as still too far away from our land, and it does not, it is not a threat, direct threat for their country, but for Czech Republic, especially Slovakia, Poland, right? Poland and Baltic countries and Romania, their main concern of these challenges, because here, and not only the perception or they perceive or not, but actually more substantially, European countries are totally covered by Russian military capability. And this image shows you the firing range of the surface to air missiles and Iskander type here. This line is the Iskander type short-range ballistic missiles from Belarus, or here is so-called Kaliningrad. It is Russian territory, right? Between Baltic countries in Poland. Right? And here is Ukraine, the Crimea, and Black Sea, Turkey, and the Baltic countries, Balkan countries, sorry. So in this sense, actually totally covered by the Russian missiles or cruise missiles, more wide, longer range of the cruise missiles totally covered of the European countries. But actually, in daily, the European people don't perceive like this, because it is not direct. It is there their opportunity to perceive this, but actually totally covered by the Russian challenges and the Russian military capabilities. And also another quite serious problem is not only the Russian challenge, but also the illegal immigrants. And it's the latest figure this image shows you as the traditional way, the Balkan way, minus 71%, and the Mediterranean way, minus 58%. So that's why this year, the first half of this year's trend is reducing the illegal migrants from African countries and Middle East. But especially Middle East here, the Turkey also stop and prevent the immigrant enter the European Union area, because the European Union pay the Turkey the huge amount of money to stop and to prevent the immigrants enter the European Union areas, right? And here, Gibraltar is another access way from Northern Africa to Europe, but relatively smaller than the other EUs. But here you can see 96% increase of the eastern land border, because Belarus and Russia recruit African people and Middle East people and try to send the Baltic countries in Poland. Right? It is a kind of their strategy to intimidate and to reduce their European countries' power and European countries' capability to deal with this and to make the European society more confused. So in this sense, this challenge also human-made, man-made challenge and by Russians and Belarus. And yeah, now I would like to introduce you what is the neoclassical geopolitics, because I think there are three quite big categories of the geopolitics, right? And first one is a classical geopolitics. You may heard the name of the geostrategists like Mahan and Mackinder, Spikeman, Hans Popper, Cheren, and Latzo, right? And already you know well what is their teach and their explanation, and it is a classical one. And basically it depends on the geopolitical condition, but think about more strategy or excuse the expansionism. In some extent, excuse on the expansionism of Germany or Japan so on. And then after the Second World War, the so-called critical geopolitics, right? It's, for example, the Dot. They totally criticize the approach of the classical geopolitics and so on. So that's why this critical geopolitics mean the critics to the classical one, classical geopolitics. And it is not offered the analysis, analytical framework of the our era. So that's why now I would like to apply and I would like to explain the so-called neoclassical geopolitics and Flint or Morgado. Morgado, he is from the Portuguese, and he is my former student. But it's quite useful to analyze the current situation, especially focus on the spatial awareness, not only this, but also the geopolitical favorable and unfavorable condition and national power perception and strategic vision by geopolitical agent. And this framework is quite useful to analyze and at least to understand the each country's potential and powers. And what is the potential? What is national power? I will later explain you, but the quite important point is this point. The perception of geopolitics in China, I mean the communist China, is very close to the classical geopolitics. And they try to excuse, for example, China as now the quite good big country. So that's why they need more, the China need more space to survive, right? It's kind of the deja vu already. We heard this approach from Chilean, for example, a Latin, a house popper, and a pan region approach. And it is especially about the ground strategy and pan-regional orientations and hard power priority. It's kind of the very, very dangerous tendency, I think. So in this sense, we need to very calmly and very carefully analyze through the neoclassical geopolitics and evaluate China's potential and China's state power. And here is some important items to study about through the neoclassical geopolitics. First, the potential and power. And I think that the biggest impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is now we are in the era of substantial hard power, not the narratives, not the discourse, but the substantial materials, right? It means that if the lack of the ammunition, lack of the bullet, we cannot fight. And you may know that Ukraine sometimes in the past few months, they are suffering of the shortage of the ammunition, right? So that without ammunition, we cannot fight. This kind of the very, very restless reality that the state, and also it means the state cannot perform better than its potential and power. And the potential means the, for example, the reserves of national resources, population, and the food and so on. But through the decision making and the perception, depending on the perception of the geopolitical agent, each agent extract from the potential to make national power. Right? So that in this sense, always potential is bigger than the power. Potential, it means that each country has the resources. And then agent extract this from the potential to the power. Okay? And then the space. The space also is quite important, but not only the focus on the space, because the agent need a favorable and unfavorable geopolitical, geographical condition, including new domains, and other geopolitical agents aware of each condition or not. And if they already aware and acknowledge of the favorable and unfavorable geographical condition, then they can deal with this advantage and disadvantage, right? And I would like to ask you, what is the biggest geographical condition or strategic, from the strategic point of view, what is the biggest unfavorable, but sometimes favorable, but unfavorable geographical conditions of Japan. Yes, no natural resources and island country, right? Island country. So that's why totally we heavily depends on the shiren of the communication. And if the shiren of the communication will cut, the Japan or Japanese people suffer from the shortage of resources and food and so on. So that's why these kind of the favorable and the unfavorable geographical conditions each country had that we need to at first recognize that this. And not only to focus on the conditions, but also how geopolitical agents recognize it or understand it, and how to counter or deal with this advantage and disadvantage. It's quite important to approach, right? And then geopolitical agents and so society they belong to. And also it's quite influential by the historical background, culture, and social tendencies, and the governing power and discourse, and so on. And then the international environment as quite important, also the quite important uh, element or item to really focus on. So that's why at least this four approach and four items we need to evaluate about each countries, right? So and it is not the classical criticism or critical geopolitics, or also we need to avoid so-called environmental determinism, right? And then the focus on the geographical conditions, but aim at the strategic analysis tools on and for agents. So that is why that I think the neoclassical geopolitics is quite useful to evaluate each countries, even including Russia and China. And here is some very simple evaluation or comparison of the Russian and the Ukrainian national potential or national power. I think it is already national power because each geopolitical agents extract it is the outcomes of the extract of their potential from potential and to make a power, right? And it is the resources. And always I try to show you make the comparison when the Ukraine as a one, how big and how small the Russian potential or power is. And the land area, of course, you may know that Russia is quite wide country. And then agricultural land and then population. Population is 1 versus 3.25. So, and it is actually, I think always describe Russian, Ukrainian power gap is 1 and 3 and 3.2. And of course, the Russia is quite big countries and even higher population than Ukraine. And the resources, in the case of resources, the Russia's resources also quite big and bigger than the 3 times or 4 times bigger than Ukraine has. And then the production, the food production, and also in some extent, the Ukraine enjoys a more bigger production amount of the corns, for example, corns and the potatoes and so on. And basically, the Ukraine export the wheat and maize from Ukraine to some northern African countries and Middle East countries, right? And especially these export is quite important to support and to keep the regional economy because the Ukrainian wheat is even cheaper than the Russian one. So that's why some African countries prefer to buy the Ukrainian wheat before the Russian invasion started. Okay? And then the population. The population is also quite important item to compute the national power, national potential. And I already told you 1 versus 3.25. It is a gap between Russian population pyramid and Ukrainian one, the same size I prepared. And here is the national and military capability. I mean, the number of the personal soldiers, the Ukraine and Russia. So that's why 1 versus 3, right? It is always this kind of ratio is possible to describe. So that's why theoretically, if the number of casualty is the same, 1 versus 3. It's a kind of the balance, right? But actually, yeah, of course, the both sides don't disclose the actual number of casualty or actual number of the wounded in action, the wounded soldier, because it is quite top secret, right? But example, the Russian Ministry of Defense describe the total number of the killed in action and wounded in action soldiers of the Ukrainian forces in February this year, the end of the February this year, 440,000. And then Ukrainian Armed Force Ukraine also announced every day the KIA and WIA total number of the Russians is 411,000, right? So that's why it is, you may know, which side is more vulnerable, you can understand, right? The Ukrainian side is third population size of the Russia has, but actual the number of the casualty is almost same, and it is not possible to sustainable for Ukrainian side actually, right? So that's why we need to support Ukraine, and we need to supply Ukraine more longer range weapons. But it depends on, of course, the next American American presidency, and also some European countries already, you may know, that some elections and outcomes in elections showed and indicate us some quite miserable for the future support of the Ukraine. And also the case of the power of narratives. And Russia always insists the Russian historical obligation. They have the historical obligation because during the Cold War, the Russia, the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union deployed their military capability around East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, this area. So that's why they recognize, at least Putin explained, it should be a kind of part of historical Russia. Right? But of course, you know, I live in here, and now the Czech Republic and Slovakia Republic, and Prague is here, and they don't think as a part of or influential part of the Russia, right? So that's why after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they try to enter the NATO and the European Union and return to Europe, right? But at least Putin recognizes not only Belarus, Ukraine, and the Baltic countries, but also the former satellite countries such as Czechoslovakia and Poland should be a part of historical Russia, right? So that's why that these we now call the Central Eastern European countries start worrying about Russian expansionism. And here it is a map. Here is Black Sea, Odessa, Kyiv, and here Ukraine, Belarus, Baltic countries, and here is Finland, and Sweden, and Norway. Before the war started, the land border between Russia and the NATO countries, I highlighted here, the yellow dot, right? And here, the Baltic countries, and Sweden and Finland were neutral country. But after Russia started the war against Ukraine, finally Finland and Sweden decided to participate and requested to participate in the NATO and accepted. So that's why it is the biggest strategic failure of the Putin, right? The Putin pushed these two countries in the NATO, and now Russia had a new land border with NATO members. Okay? And it is the quite biggest failure of the Putin. And especially it's very close to the Moscow. Here is Moscow, and it is a direct strategic distance from Moscow to the other country's national border. And of course, it is very clear that Putin wants to make them not only Belarus, but also Ukraine as a buffer zone between NATO countries and Russia. right? And also to access the Black Sea through the Bosphorus channel to the Mediterranean Sea. But now you may know that the Ukrainian attack by the drones, the Russian Black Sea fleet are almost defeated, and they escaped from the here is Crimea to the other small port. So that's why now the Russia lost also the control of the Black Sea, and they cannot sail the way safely. So in this sense, it is also the failure of the Putin's approach. Okay? And also the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There are so many impacts, so many lessons. And also, you may know that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is very far away from Japan, and it is not directly related with Japan's security or Asian security, but I think it is totally wrong because directly connect the European situation, the security situation, and Asian security situation. Because in the international society, already we we got some impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. For example, we already witnessed the existence of the regimes, right? And forces that change the status quo by force. This principle primarily they apply, like Russia, change the national border by military capability. And they think that it is correct because Russia had a right. Russia should do that. And if China will apply that same approach and same attitude toward Taiwan or the Japanese Ryukyu Island chain, we need to deny it, right? So that's why this kind of impact is quite serious. And of course, they explain at first, it is quite important special military operation at the beginning of Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it is the denazification and demilitarization of the Zelensky administration. At the first early stage, they explained, and Putin directly explained the meaning of the special military operation, right? But through this work, already we had more than longer than 800 days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? And they also changed and part of the war to regain the lost Russian ground in Europe or aiming to deprivate or erase Ukraine and Ukrainians and Ukrainian nation strengths. And then spread the forum of the West and rise of the East discourse. And I think now we need to pay attention to the fact that the Russia tried to, and China tried to spread these narratives, right? The forum of the West. The West and Japan also included this part, right? The West. It is out of date already. It is not possible to deal with current international security or international situation. That is why we need to the new framework, new narratives, new idea instead of the West and the rise of the East. East means that China. And it's quite unique. I think the Russia sometimes they describe themselves as a West, and now they start to describe their East, belong to the East, right? And they start to emphasize so-called BRICS and BRICS Plus and so on this. But actually, I think not only the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but also the Hamas Israel attack, Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthi, and behind them the Iran, right? Behind the Iran also, I think the Russia exists. And the Russia pushed Iran, and the Iran pushed the Houthi and the Hamas and Hezbollah to attack the Israel, and to realize that narrative, the forum of the West, and especially the forum of the United States, influence in the United States, and their capability to govern or to the US hegemony is already collapsed. And instead of that, we need to establish a new approach, the rise of the East. I mean that China, Russia, and the other new approach. This discourse is always we need to think about, and we need to observe behind the current, the regional conflict among the world, right? because they need to realize this. And especially Xi Jinping push and Xi Jinping request Putin to realize this. Right? It is because China always explain like this. And also failure of the diplomatic and conciliatory approach and economic interdependence theory is before the Russian invasion started. There's so many European countries expected that Russia and the European countries have the interdependence economically, and it will avoid the direct military clash between them. But finally, this theory, especially the economic interdependence theory, is collapsed and failed. And now it is a quite big problem because the Japan, well, many Japanese, even including Japanese expert, expect, but Japan and China had an economic interdependence. So that's why it will avoid military conflict, right? Both leaders expect future economic benefit than the military clash and destroy this expectation. But is it possible to expect in more longer future? Right? So that's why this failure of the economic interdependence theory is, I think it's quite serious. At least now, the China prefer to keep this approach and continue to the interdependence or export. But already we start a decoupling, so-called decoupling between China and the United States and Japan, so right? So that's why I think it will be quite serious concern of the current situation. And also the lack of the European military and defense capabilities, especially at the end of the Cold War, the European countries stopped to invest the military. And it's quite clear, only European countries, European countries reduce the investment of the military because we had a good relation with Russia. Why we need the military spending and reduce and allocate this amount of money to the economy or Green Deal and so on. But through after the post-Cold War era period, and especially the South Ossetian War, it's the European countries' reaction was quite limited, almost nothing. Then in 2014, the Russia challenged the Crimea annexation. And at the NATO Wales summit, the NATO countries introduced readiness action plans and the deployment of the command post, not the actual substantial military unit, but command post at the facilities in former Eastern Flank member countries, I mean the Central Eastern European countries, cyber defense, and increasing the 2% of GDP, the defense spending, 20% of major equipment spending allocated. This introduced, but it's not so strong and strong enough signal against Moscow to avoid a further challenge, right? And Putin recognizes at that time, okay, the European country will not react very, very quickly and very strongly enough to counter the Russian challenge. That is why 2022, February, Putin decided to attack Ukraine, right? So that's why, frankly speaking, the European countries' military capabilities totally shortage of the actual military effectiveness and so on. And here, but after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you may heard through some media describe, for example, the wake-up call for European countries, especially the Germany, right? Zeitenwende, 100 billion euros. And also the need to 2% of GDP political target, the approach, and many European pillar countries of the NATO try to achieve the 2% of GDP. But the problem is, it's not the matter of the amount of money, right? It depends on how to prepare. What is the threat of the European countries? How to strategically deal with the new challenge against European countries, and also the prepare the strategy, tactics, and also the weapon systems and so on, and training. So that's why it is for 5 years and 10 years process to prepare, right? So that's why now on the way to improve the unit. But European countries also, of course, they start increasing the military spending, but it is not enough. Because, for example, in the case of the Czech Republic, before the war, already they started some modernization projects, but it's a quite delay and delay and delay because they did not actually think the requirement and the necessity of these modernizations. And when the Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary participated in NATO in 1999, but after that, the NATO headquarters allowed them to continue to use the former Soviet-style weapon system in the new NATO members because due to the economic, due to the shortage of the budget. And it is a kind of the problematic among the NATO countries, especially the NATO interoperability, right? Each country had a different type of the weapons, even, the ammunition and the shell, the size is different between European countries and the Soviet military system and the weapon system. And finally, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, the Czech government already decided some project and for the first time introduced a German tank for Czech Republic and Czech armed forces. It is for the first time because you may know during the 1938, during the before the Second World War, the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at the time they had that historical experience of invaded by Germany. And since then, they deny to accept the German weapon. But for the first time, they decided to introduce the German tanks, right? And also they signed the F-35 from the United States. But now the European countries every European country start to invest the military. And they rush to ask the American companies to buy, right? So that's why, in the case of the Czech Republic, they signed this contract in 2023. But actually, when this jet fighters for Czech Republic, Czech Air Force will arrive in 2039, right? And it is, it's quite far away. So in this sense, now they start rushing, they start recognizing. But if something happened, then they start prepare. But it is not enough to catch up the situation. So that's why it is not the case or lessons learned from European countries, but it is for Asian countries as well. If something happened around Japan or around your country, then their government start, okay, we need to increase the number of the jet fighters and so on, but it is too late, right? Then the Poland as well and Romania, they also have quite huge items and quite big investment plan and project to do this. And I highlighted this blue colors. And can you understand why I highlighted this? What does it mean? This blue color, please. Yes, exactly. Thank you. It is South Korean products. And thanks to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, now I witness the South Korean military presence, especially the South Korean contribution of the military and equipment in European countries has been starting and expanding in quite big impact. Okay, so that's why now so many diplomats in the European countries describe, the South Korea, it's great because K-pop, K-cosmetic, and now K-weapon. Okay? K-weapon start, it's a kind of a boom. Not only Poland, but also Romania decide to import the tanks and self-propelled Howitzer, and other countries also copy it and apply the same approaches, right? And I think that is why Putin start cooperate with North Korea and to make more regional situation harsh, South Korea will reduce and then lost their ability to send the military equipment from South Korea to Europe, right? Because they need to concentrate on the regional security. So that is why the Putin start, stimulate, scoring. And I think also the case of the Iran. So that's why it is not directly, but indirectly, the Russian invasion of Ukraine already impacted the Asian security, right? Also, here is a potential comparison between European countries and Russia. And here, yeah, in the statistic view, the European country has a quite big, right? Population, it's quite even bigger than the Russian one. And also GDP, it's quite big than Russia. And then defense spending, 3 times than that Russia had. And defense spending is relatively half or less of the Russia's military spending, but number of the active soldiers. So that's why, from the at first glance, the European country had a quite, high possibility and a more bigger military capability than the Russia has. You think, but actually, it is totally, fragmented by 32 countries or 30 countries or 20, 27 countries, and also difficult to reach consensus. Each country has a different view, different diplomatic and strategic calculation and diversity, right? And always, not only this political scene, but economic scene, the European countries or European Union tend to the rule formation, rule making is a main focus of the, for example, the Green Deal from Europe. It is actually the example of the European countries want to make rule first and control the global scene, right? But the Russia, in the case of Russia, the Russian narrative is not so attractive, but resources, they have the resources. And especially the problem is the quite cheap life of the Russian soldiers, right? The Russian authority always spend the Russian soldiers, but they recognize the importance of the soldier's life, and the weight of the Russian soldier's life is even lighter or cheaper than the other countries' soldier's life. So in this sense, it is quite problematic. So in this sense, the European country had the potential, but actually on the way to prepare the possible military challenge by Russia. But a small amount of NATO military presence in Central Eastern European countries or lack of infrastructure in Eastern flank of NATO, especially, it is problematic. So that's why not only NATO, but European Union, through the European Union, try to make a network because, for example, between Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, this line of the railway connection is quite rare. So that is why it is problematic. And also lack of the military power, especially Central Eastern European countries. Poland, Romania start investing, but on the way, and it is for 5 years, 10 years of the project, and it is on the way. And no major military industries in Central Eastern European countries. It is a quite big problematic. And also existing industries, already existing industries depends on the Russian technologies. The totally different side, different preparation of this industry. So that's why this kind of the lack and problematic is now we are facing on. And then the Ukrainian support by European countries, the United States mainly the military, right? Military equipment and ammunition, missiles and HIMARS and so on. But Germany and United Kingdom and Denmark, Netherlands, Poland, and France also start and increase the military support of the Ukraine, but it is not enough. And if the Trump will be president again, maybe the military supply will cut. So that's why it is a very serious challenge for Ukrainian side, and it is not possible for European country to supply the weapons and ammunition instead of the United States to Ukraine, because their military industry capability is quite limited, right? You may know that already the European countries last year promised a medium ammunition for Ukraine, but where is the medium ammunition, right? Only 300,000 ammunition for Ukraine the last year, the European countries supplied. So that's why their capability is now on the way to prepare and increase So the impact of the wake-up call of the European countries, some accelerated the European Union decision-making. Before the war, the average 3 years of the some sanction agreement among the European Union. For 3 years, they need to prepare and they need to conclude. But after the Russian invasion, now the European Union countries can set up the new sanction within the 2 weeks. So that's why it is improved existence of the version of the authoritarianism. But the other hand, they already continue to the concept of the economic interest, especially French, German companies continue, some companies continue to operate in Russian market. Right? So that's why it is also the kind of the problematic. And the shift in mindset toward the long-term war, and especially the Putin already mentioned several times that war, Ukraine will be longer and longer, for 5 years, 10 years. So that's why now European countries also start recognizing and start preparing the more longer-term war for 5 years, for 10 years, okay? And increasing diversity and complexity, threat perception, and interest coordination. I already told you it is the biggest problem for European countries. And the protectionist tendency, possibility of US-European confrontation I described because especially the Trump, United States attacked European countries, especially the relation between Germany and the United States at that time as a totally horribly damaged. So that's why it depends on the November this year's the US decision making, but already European countries start worrying about it. But more clear point is that even after the Russian invasion started, but the NATO deterrence functioned well. Before the Russian invasion, already the NATO deployed some multilateral, multinational unit in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. But then they expand Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. So in this sense, the NATO supplied enough military capability to secure, at least to feel them the secure in the eastern flank of the NATO countries. So that's why this military deterrence is one of the success story of the NATO deterrence. But this map indicates you if current Zelensky administration will collapse or they change and accept some agreement between Russia and the Russian military will start stationing in Ukraine. It is a worst scenario case, right? Every area in Ukraine, Russia start deploying their military unit. This is a worst scenario for NATO countries or European countries, especially Central Eastern European countries. Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania had a direct border connect with Ukraine. So that's why, in this case, this land border will be the serious, confrontation between Russia, influential Ukraine, and NATO Eastern flank, especially Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. And Slovakia and Hungary, sometimes they prefer to cooperate with Russian Putin. And now the NATO start constructing some facility, more bigger size of military facility in Romania and Bulgaria to prepare some kind of the possibility of this worst scenario. But if we, including Japan and the Western country, continue to support Ukraine, and Ukraine at least get some victory and good condition, and they have some ceasefire or some treaty between Russia and Ukraine, I would like to ask you this possibility of the conclusion and the outcome of the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But if the success of the Ukraine, it is allow the NATO move this unit to strengthen the Baltic countries, because here is Kaliningrad and here is a Slovak gap between Belarus and Kaliningrad. Always, even during the Cold War, always the European military think about the image that was the Russian or Belarus attack. And here is a very flat area, and Belarus and Russia, very easy to access the Kaliningrad and to make some corridor between them. It is these Baltic countries will be isolated, right? And no supply through the land, only the sea. But here is the Russian Navy. So that's why this Baltic country will be isolated and defeated. And NATO calculated, if something happened between Russia and the Baltic countries, the Russian military capability will be able to capture and occupy the Baltic country even among the 7 days. Okay, 7 days. And NATO preparation need 10 days. So that's why you can count 10 days minus 7 days, 3 days shortage, right? So that's why we need to actually to support Ukraine and continue to fight against Russia. It is actually, not only for the fight for Ukraine, but fight for European countries and fight for the Japan's security. And also the hybrid warfare is another approach of the Russian cyber warfare and so on, and also the information warfare, and so many narratives. So many disinformations spread through the TikTok and other social networks and so on. And they start emphasizing here, collapse on Western democracy, collapse on Western unity program of the democratic system. Democracy is totally waste of the time and so on. And also the colonial and imperialistic ideology of Western countries, even United States and European countries, they experience of the colonialization. So that's why the African countries or Asian countries need to fight with China, Russia against Europe and United States. It is main narrative of the Germany. Okay, so that's why they start, destabilize not only the Europe, but also Middle East and possibly in Asia. And the social and the cultural background, it's quite interesting because here, Central Eastern European country had a tendency of the more conservative, and they are very, very parochial nationalism, and they decide to support, in some extent, more authoritarian regimes. For example, this map shows you the Europe 1940, right? And the Great Germany start occupying, and already the Austria and Czechoslovakia, and especially Czechia is already disappeared, and Poland also dismantled and separated between Germany and Soviet at the time. And then Japan, Germany, and Italy signed the tripartite treaty. And here, at the time, the Slovakia, Hungary, Romania also signed this with the authoritarian regime at the time. So in this sense, now they tend to cooperate with the Russia and especially Hungary. And Urban administration believe now that already the American and European barrier is out of date. And then China is a new leader of the new era. So that's why the Hungary need to adapt and improve the relation with China and Russia and India instead of Europe and United States. They actually think like this, and they actually explain like this. Okay? So we need to recognize that some country already start thinking about the shift of the hegemony from Europe to China, and they expect China and Russia to support like this. And then the anti-Muslim and anti-Jewish sentiment in Europe, also another quite important item, and especially the Hamas attack of Israel. And since then, these narratives, of course, Russia and China start stimulate these narratives and discourse and spread the more destabilized European society. Because some European countries, they have the quite strong anti-Muslim tendency or anti-Jewish tendency. So that's why even though the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, it is not a religion war, right? It is just, it depends on the territory. They are same, not same, totally same, but kind of the Christianity. But if, they trigger this religious conflict and to brought this religious conflict and the confrontation in the European countries. And the European countries, among the European countries, it's hard to make the unity. And it is actual, for Putin or for Russia, China, and Belarus, it's a good. More complicated, the more destabilized Europe is ideal for them. Okay? So that's why finally the lesson from Russian invasion of Ukraine and Hamas terrorism and the changing priority of the hard power and the soft power. Before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we always explain on so many academics focus on the power of the soft power, discourse, narratives, right? And the narratives, even including Russia, they emphasize Gerasimov, general staff, head of general staff, General Gerasimov, who focuses on the soft power and especially the power of the information. And he emphasized the so-called Gerasimov doctrine, right? But now we start to recognize, but just soft power cannot occupy the territory, land territory. We need at least some hard power. I mean the military capability and substantial power need. And also not just a local war between Russia and Ukraine, and right into the Russian paradigm because the armed forces, nuclear weapons, and denying Green Deal. It is a Russian paradigm, but now we should be involved. We would be involved in this Russian paradigm, right? And then the material superiority of the Sino-Russian Comprehensive Strategic Partnership for New Era. And it is quite serious. We need to think about this more serious because not only China, but China and Russia improved the bilateral security tie. And among the Eurasian continent, they can supply and they can support each other, right? And Russia had the natural resources, China as well, and land connected, and the railway. So that's why China will, in near future, China will not need to worry about the share of the communication, right? Now China heavily depends on the resources import by share of the communication through the Middle East and through the Strait of Malacca. But in near future, if China will be really from these narratives, it's quite impact for the Russian bilateral and also China's strategic calculation. And the US concentration in the Pacific, is it possible? It depends on the European countries. If European countries continue to increase the support for Ukraine by European countries, United States can concentrate in the Indo-Pacific, but I think it's a little bit difficult, even that the United States have the national interest in among Europe. And the coalition of the willing, this approach among, especially Japan, for Japan, the coalition of the willing is a quite important approach, but it is also the reduction of the suspension of the support for Ukraine. So we need to continue to keep the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine, but of course it depends on the next US administration, right? And the effectiveness and the limitation of a geopolitical approach. And finally, we need a geopolitical economic approach instead of just a geopolitical, just geoeconomy. Both the political and the economy is very strongly connected to each other, and we need to pay attention to so many items, right? Through the potential, power, and the geopolitical agent think, and the threat perception, and their domestic political power also influence, right? So that's why I think it is quite important to think about it like this. Okay, that's all today. And now I would like to offer you the question Q&A session. So please. Yes, please.
Right, thank you. I kind of like shift the attention to the increase of like right wing ideologies, especially in the Western European part. Uh, if you like look at the social medias and everything, it's rather clear that a lot of like a huge chunk of like the Western European population start to support very like radical, right wing political ideologies, and they mainly blame immigration or illegal immigrants to be specific as the main issues, and they're the main reasons why these countries are like quote unquote collapsing. Uh, do you think these right wing politicians are like taking advantage of like these immigrations and trying to kind of like frame them and to gain the popularity among the population and to gain the votes, as well as while like kind of like ignoring what's actually going on, in the sense that, well, even though immigration or illegal immigrants is a big issue, but focusing just on immigration and blaming immigrants on the societal issues, it seems to be a bit hypocritical. And I would like to know your thoughts on it and how it can kind of like also affect the security issues in these countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, of course, the immigration is a quite important topic in the European security situation as well. But at first, I would like to explain you that each country has a different tendency and different, the source of immigration or illegal immigration, right? For example, this shows you the top nationalities of that each corridor or each access route of the illegal immigration to Europe. For example, Central Mediterranean here. Central Mediterranean is Bangladesh, Syria, Tunisia. It is the top three, right? And the Eastern Mediterranean here is the Eastern Mediterranean, Syria, Afghanistan, Egypt, and Western Africa, Mali, Senegal, Mauritania, and the Western Balkan, Syria, Turkey, Afghanistan, Western Mediterranean, Algeria, Morocco, Mali, and the eastern land border, the Ukraine, Somalia, Ethiopia, and and so on. So that's why totally at first each country had a different tendency, and these, especially from people from Bangladesh and Afghanistan, they prefer to go to Europe as an economic reason, right? So in a sense, its approach is a little bit different. But I can say, for example, here is Central Eastern European countries. They are very strictly control and deny to accept immigration, migration, because they are very conservative. They are very, dislike to accept foreigners. Sometimes I feel as well in the Czech Republic, they have the very proud of the current social values, and they don't want to be bothered by the foreigner. And in the other hand, France has a long tradition to accept, the migrants, especially the former colonial area of the African countries, right? And then in the case of Germany, as far as I know, at least even only in 2015, they accept a million of the migrants in the Germany as showed the political intention to accept military immigration, right? Because you may know that it is a shortage of the labor force in Germany. And frankly speaking, in the Czech Republic also. There is 250 Japanese companies in the Czech Republic. And many of them are facing on the shortage of the labors. Because almost all European countries, same as Japan, they are now enter the aging society and the small number of the children, and already the naturally decreasing the population, right? So that's why they need to accept, at least they need to accept. But for example, like in the case of the Czech Republic, Czech government decide, okay, we accept the immigrants, but only from Ukraine, because similarity, the religion, the culture, and so on, and not from the Middle East or African countries. So that's why this Eastern Bloc, former Eastern Bloc countries is very conservative, and they totally deny to accept immigrants. But here is, especially France and Germany and UK, they continue to accept immigration, and they primarily make some rules among the European Union countries, right? Even including Central and Eastern European countries. So, and it's so-called quota systems to accept, each country should accept at least some small number of the immigration. But I think it depends on the political calculation, also the economic necessity to accept the labor. But it is a problematic always in the some kind of religious confrontation, and also some people, for example, some people, not all the migrate people does not or do not respect the European values and the European rules, but some people totally ignore and apply their own rules even in the European market, the European countries, and it is a quite big problem, right? So that's why it depends on the political decision making. But now the outcomes of the European Parliament election, you may know that now France, in United Kingdom, and in the near future, the Germany, they will change and more harsh and hard against immigration, because they start emphasizing their own country first, right? And it's the same as the Trump period. And it is actually to avoid and to deny the further acceptance of the immigration, and then also they start to stop or reduce the support to Ukraine, then allocate their own society, their own country to make Europe, make their country great again, right? And especially it's a quite big concern is now the chairman of the European Union is Hungary. And Hungary is quite strongly prefer to the European Union great again, right? So it means that to cut some supply to the Ukrainian or other immigrants, then make Europe and invest for European, right? And it is kind of, yeah, I think that it depends on the further development of the politics, but actually their conservative, their right wing is now kind of, the pendulum is returned from left to right, right? Every 10 years, they make some kind of the movement from left to right, right to left. And it's a kind of swing from left to right. But of course, it depends on political development and also the situation of the international society and so on. So that's why I cannot predict, but I think it's more hard. The major European country will be more hard to and deny to accept immigration. But some companies and some NGOs promote to accept immigrants from the European countries, the African countries, right? It's kind of the mafia, some kind of the mafia also support. And it's quite surprising, but it's also understandable that Russia strongly support, right? So that's why they spend the money to recruit and immigrants and to enter the European society. Yeah. So please. Yeah.
First one is about the parents and parents of our how it affects safety,
Yeah.
and will Russia, like how does Russia leverage their interest?
Thank you very much. Yeah, and the nuclear arsenal, nuclear deterrence is a quite important topic as well. And I would like to show you, for example, this. Yeah. This one. The Czech Republic already decided the F-35, right? And then Poland as well, F-35, Romania as well, F-35. The F-35 had the capability to bring the nuclear bomb. And you may heard, for example, the NATO has a NATO nuclear sharing program. Have you heard the NATO nuclear sharing? Yeah, some students know, some students know. Okay, so I very briefly explain that NATO has a nuclear sharing program among the NATO countries, but it is willing the countries like Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and United Kingdom. Right? Then sometimes the Turkey also support the base. And in the peacetime, United States has the nuclear bomb in each air base in NATO countries. I am in the 5 countries. But in the case of the war, United States give this nuclear bombs to each, accepted country like Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, and so on. And each air force, jet fighters, brought this bomb and attack the possible opponent. It is kind of a nuclear sharing, but nuclear sharing, if the country want to participate in this nuclear sharing, they need specific jet fighters, F-16 or F-35, and Poland already decide, and Romania, and Czech Republic. And sometimes this Polish government already declared Poland has a very strong intention to accept and to participate the nuclear sharing program of NATO. And I asked that also the Czech Air Force generals, if the Czech Republic decide to introduce the F-35, it means that some possibility to participate the Czech Republic in the NATO nuclear sharing. And he smiled and not replied. But I think I imaged that in the Czech Republic as well, because now Russia start deploying Iskander missiles with nuclear warhead in Belarus, right? Belarus here. So that's why for Poland, the next door, already the Belarus imposed the nuclear weapon. And then the Iskander missile is a short-range ballistic missile, so that's why it is enough, quite enough from Belarus to attack Poland, right? And the Czech, sorry, and then it is an old map. It's very easy to cover the Czech Republic and Slovakia as well. So in the sense, now certain countries start thinking about the nuclear deterrence. But before that, they totally laugh when we talk about the nuclear importance, or at least in Asian theater or Japan, think about the nuclear deterrence or nuclear umbrella provided by United States is quite important, but they laughed. But now they start thinking about it. They need the nuclear sharing. So that's why I think that the increase the number of the countries they want to participate in NATO nuclear sharing, and against the possible nuclear deployment of the Russia or and so on. But the other hand, each countries, European country has very limited of the nuclear arsenal, right? Only France and UK has a nuclear arsenal. But the other hand, they don't have enough nuclear industries and so as well. So that's why it is quite limited. But the other hand, they start request, asking the United States to supply the nuclear weapon. So that's why I think it is increase this kind of the pressure, or increase the nuclear deployment among the land borders between Russian influential zone and NATO territory. So that's why I think the more concentration of the nuclear deterrence, or more concentration of nuclear deployment, I expect.
I don't know if it's possible, but Hezbollah actually funds and also attacks fighters how would it affect?
Yeah, I think it is possible, right? And also the Hezbollah has quite a long, not long, but short range and middle range ballistic missile capability supplied by Iran, and Iran received technology from North Korea and China and Russia as well. So that's why I think theoretically there is a possibility, and I think that it depends on if the country, the Hezbollah attacked Cyprus, and the Cyprus in the Cyprus, the United Kingdom deployed armed forces, right? But it does not mean automatically the NATO or collective defense against Hezbollah, because each cases I already told you it's a consensus base of NATO countries, and if in some country a member of the NATO country are attacked, then that country had the right to call the special meeting, and then decide to reaction by the collectively or independently or individually and so on. So that's why it depends on the if in the case of this Hezbollah attack Cyprus, the Cyprus government requests NATO or United States to react collectively or not. It depends on like this. Thank you. So another question, so please.
I was wondering, Europe, China, and defense, how that goes forward, because you have, I don't know, countries like in the Eastern Europe which were moving away, or Hungary moving towards, then you have Italy leaving again Belt and Road, Greece with some kind of influence, and then Germany, which is the biggest economy, strongly connected to the Chinese economy. How do you see that balance going forward? Because in the media, it feels like Europe is very moving towards more critical of China, but at the same time, economic ties are so strong that
yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and European attitude against China is also one of my interesting topic, and it's quite important. And also, you already mentioned that finally Italy leaved from the One Belt One Road initiative. It's a quite great opportunity. I think that some countries very cool, calmly to think about the political and the economy is different, right? And politically more critical against China, but economically more deeper cooperation with China, because at least they lost the Russian market. So instead of Russian market, they need the Chinese market, right? Especially German companies, they think like this, right? And also, it's quite interesting for me is one German, the CEO of the quite big automobile company explained, at least European companies or European country need to continue to engage in Chinese market. It is a kind of, the vital connection between Europe and China. And if we have the disconnection, at least Europe has some leverage to influence the Chinese, the economy. But to cut everything, the European country or European Union, it means the European Union doesn't have some leverage or some power, some coercive connection with China, right? So that's why they continue to make some economic relations with China. But especially the Central Eastern European countries, they tend to more critical against China, because they mainly focus on the human rights. For them, that the human rights is a main concern. But more bigger European countries' economy is more bigger concern, right? So that's why it also, of course, it's a quite diversified tendencies. But now there's so many effort, not only by United States, but also the Taiwan and Japan and many European countries, the academics start thinking and realizing, okay, the China's challenge actually impacted Europe as well, right? They say geopolitical substantially, the European country is very far away from China. There is no opportunity to feel that direct military threat. But already, for example, the Serbia start purchasing the Chinese weapon and to impose the European area, right? So that's why they start thinking about, oh, China's challenge is now start an impact in the European countries. Here is Serbia. And also there's so many cyber attacks and the disinformation campaign by China. It's quite clear. Now, there's so many, yeah, especially the Huawei problem and so on, and the 5G and so on, right? So that's why the European countries also start thinking about China and how to avoid China's further challenges, right? But of course, I can say that Hungary and some extent Slovakia and Greece is more prefer to cooperate with China. So that's why I can say in the European Union level, it's so hard to make some mono European voice. But each member countries had a roughly more bigger power, right? Diplomatic power. So that's why I can say, for example, in the case of Italy, it is a quite successful story. But I hope the more countries like some countries, even the Poland had participate One Belt, One Road and so on. So that's why they prefer to get some economic benefit from China. Yeah. Another questions? So please.
Yeah, I think we talked about a lot how there's this dissonance between what Valentin explained, like regarding the fact that economically speaking is very different from what the political narrative is, and that there is an encounter between them, and that it's getting more, the tension is riling up, right? We're talking about how countries are so interconnected economically and politically speaking, we want to go so far that it's becoming really hard to see, because like with time and with this idea of a long-term war, we're going to start seeing more and more important consequences, right? So my question is, what do you think will happen in the end? Do you think political narratives will be able to overcome this, in the sense that they will sacrifice their economic interdependence or their economic achievements for a political narrative, or is this just a bluff? At the end of the day, will politicians say, "Well, yeah, I think economics is important"? Because I think in your presentation, you mentioned a lot that this is not only about this geopolitical approach. We also have to think about the economic dimension, and it is important. So, with this tension riling up, what do you think will happen in the end when we cannot ignore this, or when at the end of the day people will start thinking about their livelihoods, or how actually these political narratives of division will actually affect them in reality, in their everyday lives?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it depends on the politician, right? Politician's perception. In the case of the Czech Republic, for example, the current Czech president is Mr. Pavel. Is a former head of the military, of the NATO military committee. And he preferred to, put more importance on the political discourse and so on. But in frankly speaking, in the current Czech government is more preferred to economy. But even, now the Czech government consists of five different political parties coalition. Each political parties have the different opinions of the disbalance between politics and economy. So that's why I think it depends on the, each politicians and political parties perception is a strong influence. But also, social values is also the quite important factor to influence, right? In the case of Japan, maybe the economic benefit is they prefer to economy and economic balance, economic benefit than the political one. But in other countries, they prefer to political values and so on than the economy, also sacrifice the economy, right? And also it depends on the issues. So that's why it's a very, very complicated one. And it is not possible to describe just, the economy is more important than the political one and so on. But I think that in European countries, they prefer to economy, right? Economic benefit is more important than economy, and especially Germany is prefer to economy because the German industries is very strong to the political scene impact and the influence of the political scene of Germany, and they prefer to keep and then continue the economic benefit than the political values and so on. Thank you. Other questions? So please.
So I have one question. This is just my like private curious about it because this is like a European relationship and the EU, right? So as Professor earlier mentioned it, so there's a nowadays many like countries start to like import about the Korean like weapons for the like prevent the Russia, right? So in 2 weeks ago, the Russia tried to renew the
Yeah.
North Korea make a new relationship with the North Korea, and they tried to just press to the like economic to the South Korea because they tried to sell to meet try to threat to the Russian like government. So how do you think about like this like relationships gonna be like make a new war in like a Korea or like Taiwan, something like that?
So sorry.
So my
Relations
question is
between
pardon?
Relations between South Korea and
South Korea, like this, like a like worse relationship between the Russia and Korea and North Korea, like this, like situation because of the like export about the like weapons started. How do you think about the like it be possible to start a war in Korea, South Korea, or something like that? Because I just because I was in the duty of army in the engineering part in the front line, in the DM's line, so I just saw many like a Dresden by the North Korea, and my like colleagues are something.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
That's why I'm concerned about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm very interested in this deepening the bilateral cooperation between North Korea and Russia. But on the other hand, I'm very curious of the current North Korean-Chinese relations. It is not so good, right? It looks not so good, and even not so positive or proactive. Especially the Chinese side is very, very, put the brake and to slow down or even to keep the low level of the cooperation between China and North Korea. But on the other hand, Russia, more proactively dig and strengthen the bilateral cooperation, mainly for the ammunition they need, right, to the fight in the Ukrainian front. So in this sense, I think it depends on always the Chinese behavior, and the Chinese behavior, and China prefer to the six-party talk to prevent North Korea of the further nuclear development, but Russia at the opposite side. And Russia already violated the United Nations Security Council resolution, right? So that in this sense, I think this view and international interest perception between China and Russia is totally a little bit different, and also the widening the gap between China and Russia. So that's why I think in near future, the China request Moscow not to deepen the cooperation between Russia and North Korea. So in this sense, I think it depends on Chinese behavior and the Chinese policy. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, please.
I have one more question. So, does this work? Yes. So I was wondering, in Europe, the presence of the Ukraine war started to decrease a lot, and people start to forget a lot. And you mentioned that Europe should get strong so the US can focus on the Pacific region.
Yeah.
So how realistic do you see that happening? Because from living there, it feels like people are forgetting and not even increasing or staying the same, but also the support decreasing to Ukraine from European countries. So
yeah. I think it depends on the which country, right? For example, the Poland, they very concentrated study about the Japan's case and how to keep the American presence in Poland, right? It is the Poland, the Polish government, the priority is how to get and how to keep the American presence, and in the case of the Romania as well. But in the case of the Czech Republic, they don't feel that direct threat because between Ukraine and the Czech Republic, there is a Slovakia, right? So that's why it's kind of the buffer zone for them. So that's why they don't so seriously think about the Russian threat. But each countries, especially Central Eastern European countries, they tend to want to keep the American presence in Europe. So in this sense, sometimes they describe Japan as a competitor over the United States, US military presence, right? So that's why it depends on each country and so totally different. But I think the United States as well, they recognize the American national interest among Europe is quite big. So that's why they try to concentrate the Indo-Pacific theater, but I think it is not possible to leave the United States from the European continent. Thank you. Any other, so please.
Thank you for lecture. I'm interested in about invention of Ukraine, and then Japan is not currently providing weapons to Ukraine because it is prohibited by its constitution. However, Japan has a strong alliance with the United States. If Trump wins the next U.S. presidential election and the U.S. support for Ukraine decreases, is there a possibility that Japan will need to provide financial aid or weapons to Ukraine?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a quite interesting question. Yeah, I always think about this question as well. I think but it is not directly connected this between Japan's supply to Ukraine and the US supply of Ukraine, right? But I think, and I hope at least Japan start some kind of the substantial support, military equipment support to Ukraine. But I think it is not so easy to cross some, the current taboo or border among the Japanese political scene. But instead, for example, to supply the materials or even to export some equipment to United States and United States and Ukraine. Right? It is another possibility. Already, in the case of the Patriot missiles, I think that Japan tried to like this. And I think, Japan need to increase the support of Ukraine. So that's why, but as far as I know, the US authority also explained that Japan should contribute to Ukraine, but the Japan can do, right? What Japan can do. So in this sense, it is not Japan forced to supply the military equipment to Ukraine, but more humanitarian aid on the generators is quite important to supply Ukraine, especially generator and power grid. Rebuild the power grid is quite urgent supply, and this winter already in Ukraine almost all the power grid is destroyed, right? So that's why this kind of the supply is also quite vital by Japan, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions? So please. Final question.
Thank you so much. Since you're talking about like weapon systems and all that, I was thinking that how drones have played a big role in Ukraine, especially Shahid and Lancet.
Yeah.
Because these drones cost like $1,000, $2,000,
Yeah.
and they can destroy this multi-million military assets. And
exactly.
how has it affected the logistics within the NATO system and everything? And are they even prepared to face something like that? Because I feel like Russia is getting so much experience by employing this type of weapon systems.
Yeah, as far as I know, in the case of this drone, of course, the development of drone is one of the quite important lessons from the Ukrainian war, right? And China very, very, actively ran, and China prepared more drone wars, right? And I think that, the compare between Ukraine and Russia is more bureaucratic system is prevent more effective production of the drone. But in case of the Ukraine, very flexibly increase the productivity of the drone inside of Ukraine. And also the lack of the ammunition enforce them to develop the drones, right? So that's why in this kind of the drone, the next war is drone war. And I think the Japanese self-defense force also need to adapt this approach. Okay, thank you very much. And Sato Sensei, dozo.
Thank you, Hosoda Sensei, for a very insightful lecture. And also thank you to the students for very good questions and active discussions. our CAP staff, thank you very much for organizing this very useful event. And also, there will be more sessions by RCAPS, so please join next time as well. Thank you.